What's your thoughts so far of we had an open practice on Saturday. Things seem to be very optimistic coming out of that practice. How have things transitioned over the last few days following that practice in your perspective?
Yeah, generally speaking, I feel as though optimism has really picked up. I see it especially in the fan base, and I know it's that time of year, but I mean, I look at obviously I've got to compare this a bit to last year, right? And I think last year, people expected that they were entering the Billy Napier rebuild. Things weren't exactly during the summer, during the lead up. People weren't so like doom and gloom because they understood what was ahead, and now we're in year two, still looking like a rebuild. During the summer, fans were like, oh man, like we're in for a long year, things aren't looking wonderful, and we get to practice and now people are hyped up. And I'll tell you what, you're playing the clip now. I was hyped up to see this. I definitely have some takes about what the offense could look like, what its ceiling could be for this year. I believe it could be a bit limited, but I do enjoy seeing things like this in the practice setting, and we don't get to see too much, obviously. So anything is great, but I've not really seen this kind of unique deployment of players in the Billy Napier offense while he's been at Florida. Wide receivers flexing out of the backfield, running a unique like corner type of route to beat safeties and beat linebackers. It's a unique kind of matchup, and it's not so much about the quarterback play, which I'm sure we'll get into, or the general scheme of the offense, but ultimately this comes down to the talent that has been acquired, to the efforts that have been putting to recruiting to restore this roster, get it to a place it should be. A huge emphasis has been that speed, that explosiveness, that agility at wide receiver and at any skill position. And now we're going to start seeing the fruits of that. Now we're really starting to see the roster turn into what it's supposed to look like under Billy Napier. Eugene Wilson, Aiden Mizell. I mean, obviously Ricky Pearsall has been here for a bit, but that's a lot of speed. You can do a lot of fun things with that.
For sure. Now, you did say kind of again, the optimism is starting to ramp up. And I mentioned this a few weeks ago that we're in the honeymoon stage again, right? Because we're far enough past the end of last season to where we kind of forgot what happened. And now the excitement for this season starting to ramp back up. So you're back, everything feels fresh again. And of course, you start seeing the ball throw around. You're like, you have these thoughts in your head, and now you're starting to see in action. It's like, okay, well, my expectations aren't as bad. But look, what are some things that you're seeing that you're liking that differ from last year? Obviously, quarterback play is going to be a big one, but talk about other positional roles, the D line, the offensive line that we're not seeing when we watch the tape that's coming out from practices.
Yeah, I mean, I still have depth concerns for this team because of how young it is. Not necessarily because I think that these second and third stringers are without talent. Like some of them are, Shamar James being out, right? So like suddenly Jaden Robinson, true freshman, former safety, is in a bit more of an elevated role. And talented as he may be, as intriguing a prospect as he may be, he's probably not ready to play this year. That's just kind of what it is. It's a tough position to pick up, especially making the move that he's doing. But you see that in a lot of places across the roster. That being said, I feel as though last year's roster was top heavy in the sense that you've got your Anthony Richardson, your Jervon Dexter, Ventrell Miller, Osiris Torrance, a couple of just total studs at a few select positions, and questions really across the board. A lot of experiments, a lot of changing guys at different spots throughout the year and seeing what works. Whereas this year, I do feel as though you can look at the all 22 starters and feel relatively confident about what you have. Feel as though the product is going to improve. Generally, you've got a pretty good looking starting lineup. It comes down to the depth. It comes down to there's still a couple of holes in some spots, and obviously a lot of turnover that I think will require time to gel. Sometimes that kind of gets forgotten about, especially in the transfer portal age when you see some players come in and just kill it. But there was a lot of change. You look at the offensive line, 8 departures. I think once you remove Keontae Goodwin, 6 additions. That's just a lot of change. So
Sure.
uh, still things to work out.
Yeah, I talked about that too because Billy has been adamant about the talent on this team. He keeps talking about it. He's comfortable. He's excited about the talent that is to come. But if you think about going into that Utah game, although the talent may be there, it's the experience of playing in a big time game where like a Jaden Robinson, and again, the linebacker position is a very hard position to learn. You may have you're dotting your T's and crossing your I's in practice, but you put yourself into a hostile environment. It gets blurry really quickly. So you're not wrong there with the depth and the mindset of a quality transition from guy one to guy two. What do you got for him, Dave?
You're talking about the notes?
Yeah, well, I mean, questions, notes. What do you got anything for Zach on the onto the practice part?
I agree with him. I mean, I think that, you're minusing some experience. You're obviously bringing in kids from the transfer portal that do have experience, but you're adding a lot of talent that's freshman talent. But at the same time, it's freshman talent that is more talented than what Dan Mullen had. The question is here is the experience factor. I mean, you have 3 wide receivers in here that are burners, but have no play in college whatsoever. Those are guys that are obviously guys that everybody's looking after, especially, going into Utah. Are they going to use some of these guys? I'm pretty sure they'll use Andy Jean, Eugene Wilson, and Aiden Mazzell in some sort of capacity. But, you still got Caleb Douglas, Jaquavian Frazier, Ricky Pearsall, some of those other guys that are more experienced. And you want more experienced guys out there that know how to run the routes, know how the plays go, all that other kind of stuff. And then, of course, you got the offensive line. You replace Osiris Torrance and a lot of other pieces there. Luckily, Micah Mazuka now does not have on a black jersey. He is healthy. He can play now. So you got that coming for you. And I've heard a lot about the defensive line and how explosive that they've been in some of these practices. And it kind of makes you think like, well, where's our offensive line at too? I mean, it's whenever your team's doing good on one end, you always question the other end. You're like, okay, well, what's going on with this? Whether you're a glass half empty or glass half full kind of guy, but from a lot of the media personnel that I've talked to, it's feeling a lot more positive about this team than they were in year 2 than year 1. And obviously, you saw those people leave for the NFL. You saw what they did in the draft. Some of those defensive players, they did not put up that great of 40-yard times or anything else
Combine,
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so you're replacing that with more speed and more talent, just not experience right now. So, I mean, you do have RJ Moten back there. I'm not concerned about the cornerback spot. It looks like there's a lot of talent there. The linebacker spot looks pretty good. D-line, I'm more concerned about offense and injuries than I am defense and injuries because I think we got a little bit more depth on the defensive side of the ball. But the offensive side of the ball, I mean, if an offensive line a guy or two goes down, then you're looking at some other guys that probably aren't as experienced, but I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
we do have the 6'7", 6'8", 300-pound guys in there to replace them, which is good. That just came in from the transfer portal and the freshman class. And of course, if what if Graham Mertz goes down? You're down to Max Brown.
Hey. What?
No
Easy.
jinxing.
Easy, David. Easy. Real quick.
I knocked on wood. Don't worry about that.
Okay. Zach.
Point 2.
Oh, good.
I feel
Go
the
ahead.
same way. That's all I wanted to say. I feel the same way about Austin Barber. I think that he is like a A-tier, S-tier offensive contributor for this team. If you were, again, knock on wood, maybe I shouldn't say it. There's no wood in my car. But yeah, you guys get the point.
Real quick. So